challenges and the biggest joys of running a business making products from upcycled textiles. Legendary guest interviewer Kat Camfield has rounded up 3 intensely talented Canadian upcyclers. Brynn from Bot Clothing, Emily from Woodbrick, and Meagan from Salt Legacy. We hear how they each started their businesses and their different approaches to the same problem, trying to divert textile waste from landfill. They all share tips and advice, including sourcing secrets for others wanting to get into upcycling, either for themselves or to start a business. So please stick around a few minutes and we'll get stuck in. Welcome to Check Your Thread, the podcast that will help you sew more sustainably. My name's Zoe and I'm obsessed with sewing. I've been blogging about it for over 18 years and I'm the creator and host of the popular handmade wardrobe challenge, Me Made May. But, like many people, I've become increasingly concerned about the climate and ecological crises, and I'm looking at the way that my lifestyle contributes to them. So in this podcast, I'll be nerding out about making clothes whilst exploring how to minimise the negative impact that it may have. I really hope you'll join me in this journey. How are you doing? So, as you can tell, Check Your Thread is back after our 2-week Easter break, and I'm so happy to be back. And to thank you for your patience, this episode is a big one, with not 1, not 2, but 3 super lovely and interesting guests. It's an amazing episode, dreamed up, organised and conducted by our lovely regular guest host, Kat Camfield, she of the beautiful soothing voice. So, it needs to be acknowledged that the Me Made May challenge is on the horizon. So for those who aren't sure, Me Made May is the wardrobe challenge that I accidentally started in 2010 that helps people improve their relationship with their handmade wardrobes. If you want some more info, please check out episode 177, which was Me Made May explained in under 5 minutes. Since I last dropped an episode, have you had any sustainability wins? So here's a great one shared with me via Instagram from listener Nina. Nina writes, sharing my sustainability for the week, or maybe even the month. Patched a rip in a fitted bedsheet instead of buying a new one. I just make sure that when I make the bed, the patch is at the foot end of the bed, and I don't even notice it's there. And the fabric I used is from another torn sheet that I kept specifically for mending purposes. Thanks for sharing that, Nina. That's such a great save of what would otherwise be a sizable amount of fabric that was either going to be heading to landfill or dubious textile recycling schemes. I also love that Nina had the foresight to keep another torn sheet in their stash for mending purposes. I'm taking Nina's lead and I'm going to be fixing a tear in my duvet cover this week that I noticed whilst pegging it on the washing line the other day. With tears and damage, it really pays to repair them when you first spot it, because with repeated use and laundering, that damage is only going to get worse and will then be even harder and more time consuming to fix further down the line. My own sustainability win this week was volunteering at the Brighton Repair Cafe on Saturday. It was the first one of the monthly sessions that I've been able to attend so far this year for various reasons, and it was a great session. I fixed a hole in a t-shirt and another in the back neck of a shirt. I added some cool dry elbow patches to a jumper that had one of the elbows blown out, and I added a little reverse patch to a pair of joggers that had a burn hole. And I did a million tiny fixes on an ancient gardening jacket that had a lot of sentimental value to the owner, including making the buttonholes a bit tighter as they got a bit wide and the buttons kept slipping through. Oh, and to be honest, I also fixed the blown out crotch of the same guy's cotton jersey underpants. He promised me that they'd been washed, and he's a regular, and I really appreciate his commitment to keeping his wardrobe in use. But it was a big ask, but I did it anyway. So now I want to say a big old thanks to Tamlin, Annette and Diana, all of whom have so kindly signed up to support the podcast via Patreon over the last week. You are all total stars and I'm very, very grateful. It is literally not possible for me to make this podcast without the financial support of patrons. So if you think you wouldn't miss the cost of a cup of coffee or thereabouts each month, I'd be so grateful to you too for helping me keep this podcast going. So please head to patreon.com/checkyourthread to do so. And it honestly takes less than 3 minutes. So for patrons, there's some social sew together sessions coming up that take place via Zoom. So if you enjoy the support and or motivation of sewing in community, be that mending or just simply pushing forward with your current project, then that's a lovely bonus that you can enjoy as a patron of the podcast, alongside the lovely community chats in the chat spaces. Right, so let's get stuck in with this one because it is a biggie for sure. This episode was entirely devised and orchestrated by Kat, as I said, and I could not be more grateful to her for doing so because it is gold. I did consider splitting it into 2 episodes because it is a meaty one, but in the end I decided to keep it all together because it's a perfect capsule of interest and information. So huge thanks to Kat and also to Brynn, Emily and Meagan for their time and energy. You're going to love this one. So until next week, when I'm going to be exploring the important and arguably under-discussed topic of crafting and neurodiversity with our regular guest, Kim Whitten. So take care of yourself, take care of your loved ones and those in the wider local and global community who deserve our help. See if you have any rips or tears in your bedding and follow Nina's lead and get them fixed before they get worse. And enjoy.
Welcome, everyone. I'm so glad to see you all here today. We'll introduce ourselves in a minute, but I just wanted to say that we are all recording today from Victoria, British Columbia in Canada, which is the traditional and unceded territory of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, who are represented today by the Songhees and Esquimalt nations. So, could you 3 introduce yourselves, say who you are, and maybe your business name, and what fills your days? Starting with Meagan.
Hi, so I'm Meagan McDonald, and what fills my days is my company called Salt Legacy. And with Salt Legacy, I wear many hats as the founder, but throughout the day, I'm usually cutting patterns, meeting with partnerships, and doing some education and awareness about marine textiles.
And Meagan, do you want to just say what your primary product is and what you're using to make those products?
Yeah, you bet. So at Salt Legacy, we primarily use sails from sailboats, and they're all upcycled into new products, mainly adventure gear. So we focus on things like backpacks, duffel bags, tote bags, and smaller accessories to keep them out of the landfill. And we add the story of that sail, what boat it came from, into each product. So you get the history with it as well.
Cool. Thanks. Brynn, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Brynn Pitty. I'm the owner of Bebot Clothing. I have a full-time job that fills my days, but on my free time, I work on Bebot, which is all upcycled clothes, and it's all in attempt to reduce textile and fashion waste. So I'm all about finding ways to reuse, upcycle, keep everything out of the landfill. So during that time that I get to spend with that, I like to rework a lot of sweaters and do a lot of textile art and make poof shells, which I'll talk more about later probably.
Cool. Awesome, Brynn. And Emily, last but not least.
Hi, my name's Emily Peltier, and I am the sole designer and maker behind Woodbrick. Woodbrick is a primarily accessory brand. I'm making bags and some outerwear for adults, but also sometimes kids. I guess, like Brynn, maybe I'll touch later about how my brand evolved into what it is today, but my days are mostly filled with the practicalities of making, taking required pauses for business bits, and doing all the things that a sole proprietor needs to do. So along with that, I'm a parent to a young child, so that is a big part of my life as well. But every day is a Woodbrick day when you work for yourself. There really isn't a moment when you're not working, but repurposing secondhand textiles means I get to do some thrifting as well. And yeah, that's a bit about me and Woodbrick.
Cool. Thanks, guys. So I am very curious. All of you, I guess I met all of you in different ways. I think Emily and Brynn, I think I met you guys maybe through craft markets, or I'm not sure. Emily, I think I met you at craft markets, and then Brynn, I don't remember how I met you, but I remember your logo and being really familiar with your logo and being very curious. And I think I looked online at one point and you were teaching some classes. Meagan, I think I met you maybe through Jenny, the former owner of the Make House. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
you guys were connected, right? Yeah. So I think that's how I met you. So I'm curious about how you guys all started your businesses, and were they always upcycling businesses, and how did you get started? So Do one of you want to take a stab at that one? Brynn, maybe? Do you want to start with that?
Yeah, for sure. My business, I feel like, had a little seedling actually in high school when I really loved thrifting with my friends, and my grandma taught me how to sew, and I really realized then, like, holy crap, look at all of these clothes in this thrift store. Not all of them fit me, but I have a sewing machine and a minuscule amount of knowledge of alterations. So why don't I just alter these clothes to make them fit me? And I started with some and they were horrible, but you got to start somewhere. Fast forward to post-university, I was really feeling sewing again, so pulled out my sewing machine and just started having fun posting things on Instagram, and people were like, wow, that's cool, can you do that for me, and stuff like that. And then it just kind of snowballed into doing more research. I have a sociology degree, so I was really able to like look into the fashion industry and see how terrifying it is, and realize that doing what I was doing could actually help. So just kept posting, and then multiple people were like, wow, you should do this for a business. So fast forward a little bit further, that was about 2018, 2019. So fast forward to COVID, got laid off, was like, well, I think this is a good time to start a business. So started with a lot of just kind of random stuff, from just like shortening dress sleeves or cropping shirts, stuff like that, maybe like tapering pants or like adding a little cuff of different fabric to pants. Then kind of really got into reworking things. So I'd look for like the ugliest dress in the thrift store, and if I liked the fabric, I was like gold, and would go home and alter it to make it look cute. And then I kind of fumbled upon what I'm doing now, which is primarily sweaters. And what I normally do is find sweaters that have some sort of ugly logo or stains and like cover those up with something, whether that's other pieces of fabric or the same fabric. But my kind of shtick is doing denim sleeve sweaters. And so I take the pant legs off of pants and replace the sleeves on sweaters with those. And then from all of that, just kind of the classic sewist tactic to deal with their scraps and whatever fabric waste, started making poofs, like the cylindrical cushions that you would sit on or whatever, stools for listeners who don't know what they are. All you guys do, but anyways. Started making those, and people were super into them, and they were being stuffed with all these like clothing bits and scraps and whatever. And I realized that those are about 15 to 30 pounds each, so are not very good to ship. Where those kind of started is I decided to make them with a zipper instead of sewing them shut, and thought, oh, I could sell them empty. And then ding, 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 this is my like winner idea, which maybe don't say winner idea, pick something, I'll say something else. My idea was that instead of me filling them up with clothes or scraps or whatever, is that I could sell them empty for other people to fill them up with their clothes. And that is now a trashin' bag, if you will.
I love that.
For other people to reduce their fashion waste. So that's kind of been what's been popping off a little bit and has been putting me on the map a little bit. So yeah,
That's
the
super
seed started in high
cool.
school and now we're here.
That's awesome. I love your trash and bag. Those are godsend for places where, you know, there's no local textile recycling like Victoria, and also for sewists, right? I have one as well, and I sit on it a lot, so it's gotten a bit of a funny shape because I think I didn't stuff it enough, so I've just got to keep putting more scraps in. So they're great.
Yeah, that's why the zipper is like a key part of the design, is that you can just unzip it, keep stuffing, and if it turns into a pancake, then you just keep stuffing, and it holds a lot.
It does. They're amazing.
I wanted to mention that Brynn also sells the pattern for her poofs.
Oh, thanks, Emily. Yes, I
Because
do.
I was one of your pattern testers, and
You
so
were.
if you want to buy one of Brynn's poofs, you can. But if you want to make one of Brynn's poofs, you can.
Yeah,
And-
thanks
'cause
for that little
don't
plug.
you teach sewing as well?
I have in the past, yeah. Yeah, and that was a really fun workshop to do, is the poof workshop. because then everyone gets to stuff it at the end, and then we do a little poof race where we roll them down hallways and stuff.
That's amazing. The poof, it's like the project that keeps on giving. It's
It
not
is.
just like you can take the scraps from making your poof and put them in the poof too.
Exactly. It's all, everything goes in the poof.
That's awesome. Emily, do you want to talk a bit about how you got Woodbrick started, where it came from, what the seedlings were, what the seeds were that grew into little seedlings that grew into the business that it is?
Well, that's kind of an ironic way to segue because Woodbrick started when I was pregnant. And having my first year of maternity leave. So I was growing my own seedling.
Aww.
But I've been sewing for a long time, like learned to sew from my mom when I was growing up. And then, like a real cool kid, took after school sewing lessons through middle school. And then I have a degree in technical theater. So I did costume design and costume construction. And then when I was at home, pregnant and on maternity leave, also during the COVID years, then I was sewing a lot in, any downtime that I had. And made a kid's fanny pack was the first thing I made that felt like I would want to make more.
So hang on. So a fanny pack for kids to wear?
Yes.
Got it. How old of a kid would be wearing your fanny pack? Like little kid? Like toddler wearing a fanny pack?
Toddler wearing a fanny pack. I think at that time I had connected with some local kids makers and vintage resellers. And I'd seen something, maybe an idea on Pinterest, and I made one as a birthday gift for like a second birthday and made a kid's fanny pack. And then before you know it, I was making more. And I think it started as an upcycling project because at the time during COVID, someone gave me like a bin, left a bin on my porch of quilting scraps, of like quilting fabric. And then as I started to sew and was making really small little bags, the quilting scraps were kind of the perfect thing to piece together into something unique. And then fast forward to, doing a market, my first market, only selling kid-sized bags.
Oh,
and then
wow.
all these adults kept trying to put these bags onto their bodies because they were like, these are so colorful. I've never seen anything this unique, just to wear a little pouch across your body. And I kind of figured out how to make things for adults that also like sparked that kind of joy and connected with, one of a kind interests, people that really wanted to just have something that only they ever would have.
So you went from like doing kids bags to adult bags. But I know now you also make like quilted jackets, right? That's a substantial part of your business.
It is at the moment. Yeah, for sure. And I had dabbled with kids' coats and kids' clothes as well. And then now I'm making some outerwear for adults. And I think really motivated by finding the textiles that are available. So once I stopped making teeny tiny things for kids, then I was actually able to consume into my business and into my process, like larger swaths of material. So it was inspiring to go thrifting or to find things secondhand that I could imagine using a large amount of fabric and diverting that large amount of fabric from the landfill and in addition to, tiny scraps of material. So for a while I made dungarees, overalls. Cool. So that was really great to find, printed sheets and draperies and things like that. Again, thinking about like the physical size of the fabrics that I was able to save. And then the quilts and blankets are a great way to kind of do the same thing, like to be like rescuing and repurposing larger amounts of fabric.
Gotcha.
And that's where I'm at now. Yeah, mostly accessories. And I wanted to make sure to include as well that when I was making things for kids, I was really motivated by making things that were the right size for their bodies. So straps that were small enough to go for small little toddlers, but then would extend to maybe, young adult age. And then now that I'm making things for adults, the inclusivity and accessibility based on sizing is really important to me. So making bag straps that extend to accommodate all bodies. And in the same way that I was passionate about making things that fit kids in a way that was safe and making things for them and for their bodies, then also making things for adults and that make every adult feel that they can access, sustainable and expressive accessories.
That's awesome. It really picks up on a recent episode that Zoe did. I think she interviewed a woman named Sasha, whose business was called Sasha Starlight, and all of her patterns are really cool. Did you?
Yeah, the drawstring pants. Yeah, no, her patterns are amazing. Yeah.
That really are like they either the patterns, the garments accommodate multiple sizes, or they are adjustable, like there's dungarees with little ties on the side, or a pair of palazzo pants that have a tie in the back. So that, it's interesting how I feel like makers and pattern designers are thinking more now about size inclusivity, but not the nice flip side of size inclusivity is it also, if you make garments that can change with our bodies, it's more sustainable because you don't have to say, oh, these pants don't fit me anymore, they're out the door. It's like, oh, maybe they're adjustable so that they can accommodate a fluctuating size, right? Which is pretty cool.
Always felt like fast fashion really does exclude so many people, and it's like designed for us to continue to consume. But if you put in these like redundancies of like, changing bodies so that you can adjust sizing, or like Brynn was saying, you can have the skills to adapt clothing to your body. It's a bit of a radical act, and sustainability and strong moral values, I think, it all ties together.
Yeah, really nicely. And Meagan, I know you're not making clothing, and your source materials are different than Brynn's and Emily's, but can you tell us a bit about how your awesome business got started?
Yeah, definitely. So to start, my background is in marine biology, not in business. And my earliest memory of sewing anything was in grade 8 home ec class, and it was a pair of pajama pants. And I never picked up a sewing needle or touched a sewing machine since that point. And so how Salt Legacy evolved essentially was through witnessing marine textiles winding up in the ocean, and myself purchasing a sailboat and living on it at the time, and looking up at that really durable textile, the sails, of course, and I had to discard a used sail, and trying to figure out, well, how can I do this responsibly without taking it to the landfill? And recognizing that this material is extremely durable still, and it would be a shame to discard it. And so with my background in researching marine debris and ocean plastics, and really having a strong passion for sustainability and conservation towards our oceans, I had the crazy idea to mix all of those interests and passions together and create Salt Legacy and what my business is today. So when it came to having this idea of upcycling sailcloth, I honestly didn't know where to start, because I knew I wanted to create some really high value items, and again, not only to allow them to avoid a landfill, but to create a connection with people and going back to that connection with nature that we all have. And that's why I decided to put the history of each boat that the sails come from in each product. But to be honest, I didn't know how to sew, even where to start. It was just myself and a good friend of mine at the time kind of helping me in her spare time. And we took sewing lessons at the Make House. And that's where I met Kat, and I was watching YouTube videos, but I was sewing on my sailboat because I was living on it at the time. And so that was an interesting perspective as well. But I slowly started learning a very easy pattern, which was my signature sailcloth tote bag, which we still have to this day.
Oh, cool.
But as the business has evolved since 2020, our products have evolved immensely, and I've been lucky enough to have really talented sewists join my team over the years. So I don't do a whole lot of the sewing now. I do basically all of the cutting of the patterns, which in itself is a really nice creative outlet, because we are hand tracing every single of our patterns to really showcase the unique elements of that piece of sailcloth. And for those who aren't familiar with sailcloth, it comes in all varying weights, really, really thick to really thin and whimsical, different textures. There's carbon fiber running through some of them. So not only is it not easy to sew, it's also not very easy to cut. But the end product is, as it evolves, is a one-of-a-kind piece of art, essentially, and every single item is completely different. So I feel it's a really special thing at the end of it, and then with that connection piece with the history of the boat attached to it, a lot of people really resonate in different ways with the products that way. But yeah, essentially just learning everything on the fly, learning how to start a business on the fly, learning how to sew, grow a team. But I'm very fortunate to have some really amazing team members who are very talented in what they do and become a part of this team.
It's so cool how each of you started your businesses with upcycling, because one of the things I was curious to ask you was, did you guys start out sewing with regular store-bought so-called virgin fabrics or not? But you all, it sounds like you all with your businesses started right away with upcycling from the ground up. And Meagan, you're like sourcing sales directly from people, so then you get the story of which boat it was from and who was the previous owner. Sounds like you, Brynn and Emily, you two have been thrifting. Is that the main source for your fabrics, or how do you guys come by the fabrics that you use for your products? Emily, do you want to go first? Or
Yeah, thrifting is a big part of my fabric sourcing. Thrifting and garage sailing, marketplace. I have found there are like local thrift stores that I would choose to support over some of the larger conglomerates. But overall, there's so much fabric everywhere that it is not difficult. I always like to say to people that especially if I am in a situation where people are asking me this question or telling me they're interested in sewing, I like to say that if you go to any secondhand store and just like squint a little bit, it's a fabric store.
Nice perspective. It's like, wow, there's textiles everywhere.
Yeah, Brynn loves this. Yeah, it's all fabric, right? And with some experimentation and a little bit of creativity, really anything can just be fabric to be reused. Of course, there's like considerate vetting in that process, and I have definitely made mistakes along the way of like choosing fabrics that aren't appropriate for the projects, or also choosing fabrics that I think will make great bags, and then the durability just isn't there, right? This is not a problem that Meagan has. Everything is durable beyond belief. But because it's built into my business and my brand, I think there is the understanding that the nature of upcycling means that I don't always know the history or the fabric content or like the lifespan of these materials, but the risk is just always worth it, because the ability to make something that's so exciting and unique, using material that no one could replicate or duplicate is just like so rewarding.
It's fun. And then I guess because not all of your work, but some of your work is patchwork, right? Where you're putting fabrics together, but sometimes you're using whole cloth as well.
Mostly whole cloth. If I find patchwork that's already been pieced, that is like gold. And then obviously I am working with finished, completed quilts often when I'm making my outerwear. But I am not a precision cutter or piecer, so I avoid patchwork like crazy. This might be why I have so many scraps, you guys. Because people are like, just like piece it together and make, do some quilt blocks or things like this. Like, this is not where my skills lie. So I love working with whole cloth, and especially because then you can, like Meagan, like do strategic cutting and be choosing patterns and then also making collections. So I really like to work in larger collections. So if I find larger swaths of material, then I will try and make several bag styles out of one fabric, and then try and, create a bit of a collection out of coordinating material. So
cool. Brynn, what about you? How are you sourcing your fabrics for your poofs and your sweatshirts?
Yeah, I started my business with like call outs for donations, which was super fun, but it got overwhelming very quickly. I started with just being in my house and just kind of asked a lot of friends and family for things and would go thrifting as well and loved going to like vintage sections and yeah, like I said before, finding like the ugliest pattern of a dress but stuff that I like the fabric of. Would go to stores that were like going out of sale, like the Patch in Victoria was like a staple secondhand place, so when they were going out of business definitely jumped on those sales. But after a while of accepting donations, and I moved into a designated studio space that was about 200 square feet and was like, yes, I have so much more space now, I can open up my donations to the public. And did it definitely by appointment, and like you had to reach out to me first. I didn't have like just an open donation drop-off point or anything like that, so I could kind of regulate it. But I didn't regulate it in the sense of giving people restrictions. I was like, just give me everything. I'll go through what I want and then I'll deal with the rest. And that got me into some sticky situations because people, for example, I had one girl drop off like 2 of the industrial size garbage bags of t-shirts that were all one size. There was like probably, I'm going to say close to 150 of like the same style of t-shirts in different like short sleeves, long sleeves, different colors. And I don't do anything with those. So,
oh my gosh, what did you end up doing with your bags of t-shirts?
Honestly, I took a few of like probably about 20 of them just to wear. I'm actually wearing one right now, which is hilarious.
Amazing.
This was like 3 years ago. They were all size small and I'm not a size small, but I stretched them out to be my size. I gave a lot away and I have some other friends who do screen printing, so I gave some to her. And at the studio I was at, actually, we had open houses where people could like wander through. And I used that as a little demonstration to show how much textiles were, I forget if it was like go in the poofs or get thrown away per second or like whatever the heck, but it was like a little demonstration and to show. So I was like, I just have all these extra clothes. So I did stop taking donations because of that, but I did get a lot of like really cool stuff. But I found when I kind of switched over from doing all kinds of upcycles to just the sweaters, all I needed at that point was just like sweaters, which are basically only I do like hoodies and crew necks, not any like fun like chunky knits or any athletic wear. Like I was just very, very specific to just crew necks and hoodies and jeans. But even with those, like, there's so much variation in jeans, and there's a lot of colors I don't like, there's a lot of washes that I don't like. So I was just getting all this stuff that like I didn't need. And that's also how the poofs really became a thing. I was like, well, if I could just stuff this all in the poof, then I don't have to donate it. I would donate stuff that I wasn't using that was like good enough to be donated, but there's so much stuff that was just too worn out or wrecked or just like, out of style, whatever, that I was like, I don't want to donate this and dump. So put those in the poofs. And people in town were buying them filled, which was nice for a little bit. So that was kind of like a good way to stuff them. But kind of as I was like explaining, as the poofs kind of came along, just like with what I was doing, I had actually other sewists in town and designers reach out and be like, do you want my scraps? So that's kind of how the patchy poofs came around, is like I was getting all these extra scraps from other sewists in town, which was super fun. I actually got huge garbage bags of beautiful linen from Lecca Design in town.
Ooh, lucky you.
Oh my God. I was like, this is like hundreds of dollars worth of like, like 2 by 2 foot scraps, which are like too small for them to use for anything, but that's like a gold mine for me. So I love patchwork. Like that's super, super fun for me. So that was like super exciting. But as time on, I got a studio mate at my studio, so I lost a lot of storage space. So I was like, I gotta deal with what I have, and I had to stop taking donations, and I had to start being a lot pickier about what I was accepting or getting. I was just running out of space and just like couldn't make fast enough, which I feel like every sewist doesn't have enough space for all of their fun fabric.
Yeah.
So I did end up deciding that like I just got to start thrifting and only sourcing stuff that I'm actually gonna use. And I don't love doing it because I do shop at not the best
I turned my microphone on so that I could react to Brynn because I wanted to say ooh earlier.
About what, Emily?
Ooh, about Lecca. Ooh, it's such nice fabric.
Lecca's a local independent garment shop that sells a lot of linen and beautiful wool and stuff like that.
Yeah, so I'm thrifting right now. I wish I could support more of the local do good charity shops in town, but what I found is what I'm looking for, they don't have. And so I've tried it before, and I'm just driving around town to like 8, 9, 10 different thrift stores and maybe getting 1 or 2 pieces at each place. We're just going to the big boys. There's racks full of sweaters, and I can go to one place and leave. And so that's something I definitely want to change in my business. I don't love that. I do want to do more call outs for like, okay, I'm only accepting sweaters and then refusing everything else.
Yeah.
Or I've also done a lot of sourcing at clothing swaps, because then I can go, there's a wide array of stuff. And often, you know, I did one at one of the community centers in town, and I walked in and the lady knew who I was because she was following me, which was like super cool. I love walking into a place and people are like, "Bebot, hey!" And I'm like, "Heck yeah, I love being known for this." But she was like, it was, you know, I always go to fabric swaps at the very end because I don't want to take anything that maybe someone else did, but also there's a plethora, and they're like, as soon as I walk in, they're like, "Please take as much as you want. Like, do you want more? Like, do you want another bag?" So that's how I really like to go source as well. That feels a lot better to do it that way. And then I also, I get to pick what I get, and it's not even getting to the thrift store at that point. And then it's free. And then I can make my sweaters a more comfortable price.
Oh, yeah.
So they can be a little bit more budget friendly, where if I'm thrifting, then they do need to be a little bit more expensive just because I'm paying for the fabric rather than getting them donated.
Gotcha. So it sounds like for the most part, Emily and Brynn, these days you're thrifting yourselves to find your source material for the most part. Mm-hmm. Meagan, I'm very curious because it's not like you go to a thrift store for a sale. So, and I know you get your sales often directly from people who own boats, but how do people find you? How do they find that's a place where they can take their old sales to Salt Legacy?
Yeah, so essentially at first it was just kind of word of mouth, myself going to marinas, and I was living on my boat in a marina, so word spread kind of through the community that way. But then I got some good PR. I was featured in a couple magazines and on the news and on the radio. And at that point, words just kept spreading. And honestly, at this point, I have a hard time denying people, and I don't have enough storage or can go through the sales as quickly as people want to bring them in. So originally writing my business plan, I thought that would be a big barrier. Like, what if I can't get my hands on sales? Then I can't make products. But this far in, it seems like the word keeps spreading, and people from even throughout the Pacific Northwest want to bring sales over, and even across Canada at points. So yeah, at this point, I've been really lucky, and I haven't had any sort of barrier to get these textiles.
That's fantastic. I'm curious, are there other businesses that you know of that make things with sailcloth, or are you kind of the only name in the game?
So during my creating my business pitch and plan, I did a competitor analysis, and globally there are quite a few different companies that are making items out of sailcloth, and it's been really great. Just being in the community on Vancouver Island, I do a lot of local markets, so I get to chat to a lot of people in person. And people have those bags on their shoulders that they bought in Europe or in the United States. And I've gotten continuous feedback that they've had these bags for 20, 30 plus years, and they bought it and it still looks the same. and they love the concept. So definitely globally, there are quite a few different businesses doing similar things. Vancouver Island, I know I am more so one of the biggest company. There's a small outfit in Tofino doing something similar. But yeah, for Victoria, I'm the larger organization doing this at the moment for sure, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. So I know you mentioned that you get sales from sometimes across Canada or other places in the Pacific Northwest, but are most of the sales coming to you from Victoria sailors? And do you feel like if you were just sourcing from people locally, would that keep you in enough sales for what you need with the business?
Yeah, so definitely a lot of local sales, and I do presentations at yacht clubs and participate in events that way and try and get into that world as much as I can. But also whenever I'm going up island, I'll stop and pick up sales from up island. I've had a kids sailing school actually sail over sales from Portland, and I got to use those sales and then embed that story into the products that were made with that. But another special thing is I even had an individual hold on to a sale that him and his brother grew up together sailing in Mexico when they were teenagers. And fast forward 40 years, he still had this sale. So he brought it to me and we made custom products for his whole family. And with the map on the inside, we changed it to that specific area that they grew up sailing. So I have gotten sales even internationally at this point as well, which is pretty special. But yes, at this moment in time, I feel like my business in Victoria is pretty sustainable with the amount of sales coming to me here. But I do have ideas in the future to open up hubs or chapters of Salt Legacy in other sailing destinations. So I can take sales from those specific areas, implant the business model there, hire local sewists, and continue that business model in other areas in terms of scaling that way.
That's super cool. That sounds amazing. It's like, let's get some hyper locally made products, even more local than, say, just Victoria to the island.
Mm-hmm.
You guys have kind of touched on this, but so sourcing your material is obviously a big part of all of your businesses, and it takes some time and energy and effort. Other than that, what other kinds of work goes into making your products? I mean, I know you're going to be sewing stuff, but what else goes into your products? Brynn, do you want to take a stab at that one?
Yeah, so a lot of what I do, like I said before, is making sweaters wearable. And so that's taking sweaters that are stained or have an ugly logo or damaged in some way and making them into something that's going to be cool and wanted to be worn again. So a lot of what that looks like is trying to figure out how to cover up these stains or the logo. And that's not always an easy thing, especially when I want to make them cool and like look exciting. And so just like designing the cover-ups or the patchwork, or when I'm using sleeves from pant legs, sometimes the pants are ripped in certain places that like sometimes it looks really cool if they're ripped, and sometimes I'm like, this isn't the sweater that needs to be ripped. So covering up or patching up those holes. Sometimes the pieces that I have aren't big enough. For example, if I have like a light wash denim that I really want to use and they're a size small, then I have to use a size small in the pants, but it's for a larger sweater. I'll have to like cut open the sleeves and add some more fabric so that it's going to fit onto the armhole. And that always is just like extra things. It's not just like slapping on a patch and calling it a day. There's like all these extra things. And then of course, once I finish a lot of them, I hold them up and I'm like, well, I didn't see that stain, or like, oh crap, there's a paint stain on the back that I didn't see. So yeah, like for example, I made a batch of sweaters to sell in a store in town, and my studio, I mean, it's wintertime, so like the studio was like super dark, and then I was taking pictures on the weekend when it had natural daylight, and all of a sudden 4 of the sweaters that I made and was like, everything was ready to go, I found oil stains on that I didn't see in the dark. So now I gotta go back and figure out, and of course they're not in like an easy place to just put something like a cute little patch over top. They're like 2 inches left of the belly button, and like, what are you gonna do there? So I just like put on like a kangaroo pocket on the front of that one, and another one had like some weird stains up by like the left shoulder, which is like too high for kind of like where you'd put like a brooch or something. So just kind of like put a whole big patch over the whole thing that like just touched up there. And that's, yeah, it's just like, it's not as easy as just sewing with brand new fabric where most of it's going to be good to go. Like you have to check for all these things. That is not what you're expecting. I'm sure Emily, well, I'm sure you both deal with that too, is that not every piece that you're dealing with is going to be perfect, and you have to figure out what to do with it. So I feel like that's a huge part of the design process and why things take longer than people expect, which is why they're priced higher, because it's a lot of saving, it's a lot of finagling and figuring out, and then you have to go back and figure it out again. So there's been so many times where I'd had to like rip apart the whole seam of something and do it again because it's like, I can't sell it like this. I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
I think that what you're saying, Brynn, sounds so familiar, and to me that just is summed up by the word laundry. Like there is so much laundry involved in upcycling, but I had never considered that I would be like soaking things in my bathtub to try and like make old curtains smell better. And then it's like just an uncategorized, like task, and then cost, and then intermingling with my family's laundry, like and like airing things out. And I know Meagan deals with this too, because things have been actually like, used on the ocean. But just the amount of like cleaning and stain removing, and then discovery that you aren't actually as good at stain removing as you think you are. All of that. So, and just like an unseen labor of upcycling, laundry.
Oh my gosh. That's something I hadn't thought about. Yeah, Meagan, did you want to add to that? Because I have no idea. Like, I don't sail, so I don't know like what a sail smells like or looks like at the end of its life.
Oh, smells. So many smells.
Yeah, oh yeah, so many things. But I'm just happy I'm not the only one who has soaked things in my bathtub. So Emily, I'm grateful to know we share that pain together. So yeah, essentially with sails, like, I mean, I'm usually getting them out of someone's garage, and there's cobwebs, there's dried up spiders on them, like there's all sorts of stuff, right? And yeah, like the smell, you get seawater. I mean, also if they're sitting in a place that air is not moving, there's mold involved as well. And so that was my biggest thing at the beginning, was trying to combat mold. Like, how could I use an eco-friendly product to get the mold out? And that was me scrubbing just with my hands in the sails soak in the bathtub. And I had a whole thing once I moved off my boat into an apartment. And yeah, I'd cut the sails, they'd soak overnight in the bathtub, and then I would sneak them into the shared laundry in my apartment building, and then put them through a wash cycle, and then hang them back up all over my apartment. And again, I'm so thankful for one of my best friends, Tisha, who's also an entrepreneur, and she put up with that, and she was right there beside me helping me scrub these dirty sails to get this business up and going. So I'm glad that you guys have had similar experiences that way. But yeah, that's the labor. The labor is huge when it comes to upcycling, and that's what the price reflects. And a lot of people, they look at a price tag and they're like, holy, I can't believe that's what your price is. But they don't see what goes into the back end from just getting that fabric to a usable state, right? And even with sails, they're not square, they're triangular. So cutting patterns is not easy once you even get to that stage, right? So it's a labor of love, what we're all doing. And yeah, it's, unless people see it with their own eyes, they won't really understand the process. I don't fully think so. Yeah.
Do all of you or do some of you sell your items at markets versus just online? I'm curious about people's assumptions because we were talking about like, oh, the cleaning part of the process is not seen, right? So are there assumptions people make about your products, people asking questions that are odd or unusual about your products?
I can go with that. Part of my business plan was seeing kind of like the weaknesses in using a product that was going to go to a landfill, and that's what my business concept is. So a lot of assumptions from people, if they're not familiar even with the term upcycling, which is a pretty new term. And so a lot of people, would see my product and say, oh, well, that's garbage. Like, how do I know that's going to last longer? Like, it was supposed to go into the landfill. It's already been at sea, as you're saying, for 5, 10, 20, 30 years. How do I know that it's going to last even longer? Like, it's not made for another life. So my job is really to use education and awareness and even just get people to touch the fabric, right? And really kind of use education to see if I can not change their mind, but just open their view to a textile being seen in a different way or a different purpose. So yeah, I have definitely got a lot of people not interested in my products because they're like, why would I want that? It's garbage, right? But on the flip side, like I've said, a lot of people who have purchased a sale bag 20, 30 years ago, and it still is serving its purpose and it's outlasted so many of their other bags, they know the value of that textile and they believe in the upcycling process and whatnot. So yeah, I've definitely gotten both views heavily. Yeah.
Wow, it kind of blows my mind. Maybe it's because maybe the four of us are a little bit like-minded, but it blows my mind that people would say, but you're making them out of garbage, as if somehow repurposed textiles isn't like an amazing use of a product which has been, in some cases grown, processed, made into an object, had a life, and to be able to continue its life, that people think of that as garbage, as opposed to raw materials. Because for all of you, you're all using repurposing things. So the fabric has already had one life and you're giving it another life. So, which is like, of course, amazing ecological value, right? And then with durability, with the sales, for example, like amazing value, right? That you could be buying a bag from somewhere else made out of like conventional fabric that's going to last you a couple of years instead of, 10, 20, 30 years, right? Mm-hmm. Emily or Brynn, have you had similar or interesting interactions with people about talking about your products being upcycled, or people raising eyebrows at that?
Yeah, I don't think I've had anyone been like, wow, you're making stuff out of garbage. That's crazy. But I do remember one of my first markets that I did with the sweaters is that there was someone looking through them. She seemed pretty excited. And I think it was like a grandma with her granddaughter or something like that. And she's like filing through them, and then I had them all sectioned off based on size. And she picked one up. She's like, do you have this one in another size? And the lady behind me just like kind of scoffed at her. She's like, oh my gosh. And I was like, no, sorry, they're all one of one. And she's like, so you don't have anything in the back? And I'm like, these are all upcycled. They're one of one. No, I don't have anything else in the back. Like, all the sizes are just what's there. And she's like, you should make more sizes of this one. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to explain this to you.
Oh, wow.
And then with the poof shelves, which are, I've only done one market with them, and they come as an empty cushion. To anyone listening to try and visualize that, they're like just a pancake, and I fold them up into just like quarters just so that you can see the fabric, and I have like one filled poof on my table it was clear so you could see what's inside, and then I have like one kind of unfolded. But they require explanation, and I just found at markets people are like, I don't know what that is, and walk past, or just like so confused. And that was like such interesting information. It was just at a Christmas market, so people, I feel like at those markets are like, need to see something to like go over, and if they don't see anything they like, they just move on. But it was super interesting just to see how many people had no idea what was going on or like what it is, but like also fair enough, like what are those? What are we doing here? So that was an interesting thing for me, is like I had to explain this to every single person who was coming up to my booth. And it still went over a lot of people's heads, which is like fine, not everyone's in this fashion mindset that we are, but it just created a lot of cool conversation about people being like, oh, I had no idea of like what the problem is, or like that we should do anything about it or whatever. And then I got a few people who were like, this is the coolest thing ever, like this, who are you, like what, I've never seen anything like this. So just kind of like a wide array of like people knowing and getting it, or like just not even understanding and not having that capacity, which is super fine.
It's almost as if the public requires more information about the reuse and repurposing of textiles in our local community.
Why do you bring that up, Emily? Emily is obliquely alluding to the fact that the four of us are part of a group that is starting up to provide education about textile reuse and waste reduction in the Victoria area, called the Textile Renewal Network. So that's what she's mentioning.
It's so true, though. This is the experience that I have all the time, is that people either get it right away or are open to explanation. And then I guess the third category is that if they're just never going to be open to this concept. And so regardless of demonstrating or feeling the materials or explaining your process, some people will just never connect with it. And for every person that doesn't, there's 10 that are so excited. So
yeah, I'm glad that there's a market for it, and that, not everybody's there yet, but hopefully as conversations around textile waste just continue and, start getting into the mainstream, that you'll have less people who are puzzled by your products as opposed to people who are very receptive to it. So kind of like connected to that, do you guys find that your products, I know they're maybe a little bit different, and Meagan, your situation might be kind of different from the other two, but do you find your products appeal to a certain type of person? Like, do you guys have typical customers who your products resonate with, or is it really broad? I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, I'll speak to that. Yeah, but in terms of demographic, my Instagram stats tell me that my ideal age demographic is, age 20 to 35 female identifying folks. But in person, when I'm at markets, I find that just about anyone can walk by and, find something that they think is interesting. And part of that is the variety of textiles. At least for me and my work, my materials are always constantly changing. And so there are things that just appeal to a really wide range of folks. And then there's opportunity for conversation with just about anyone, because, people that remember textiles from when they were growing up, would see something that's vintage or see a quilt and understand that there's a quilter in their family. So then they see the labor in that, or, see the value in repurposing things. And then I do really find that the younger generations, we live in a town where there are a lot of students, under the age of 30, are really committed to making sustainable choices in their life and putting their money towards things that they can morally support. So although I find that I'm able to sell to just about anyone, or I do find that young folks are especially enthusiastic about the work that I'm doing. But one of my missions is to try and hide upcycling in plain sight a little bit. And so some of the designs that I'm focused on do mimic styles that are popular or trendy in the mainstream fashion. And so while my materials that I'm using are vintage or, exclusively secondhand sourced, the main bag that I make mimics the shape that is made by many mass manufacturers. And that's the crescent bag. And so while that is not a revolutionary shape or product design, by using secondhand material, I'm able to provide something that people already are looking for in their life because their friend has it or 10 of their friends have it, but then creating something that no one else has. And so you can choose upcycling as a everyday option and not have it be something that you would turn away from because it wouldn't, fit in with the rest of your lifestyle or your closet.
I love this concept of stealth upcycling. It's like we're just going to sneak that into the marketplace and nobody will know. But yeah, it's trendy and there's comparable products everywhere. And yeah, that's awesome. So we were talking a bit about your various products and who they appeal to. And it seems like there's a mix. I'm curious if you guys have any stories about particular customers that you've encountered with your businesses that connected with your products in some kind of interesting way, whether it was like what you've made or the fabrics you were using. Emily, do you want to? Yeah.
Yeah, I had a story about someone I connected with through Marketplace. I had reached out to purchase a quilt that was up for sale secondhand, and then I noticed they had multiple listings. So they were selling a bundle, essentially a bundle of quilts, and I reached out to say that I would be interested in purchasing essentially their collection of quilts, which is maybe an odd thing to do. So I included a link to my website and said, if I purchase these quilts from you, I am going to use them in other ways. I'm going to use them to repurpose into garments or into bags. And I got a firm no back from them, which I respect. I do believe that once you've sold something, you don't necessarily get to choose how that is used in the future, but because it was obvious to me that this was a well-loved collection of quilts, I wanted to, be open about my intentions with them. And about a week later, I received a message that said, we've been thinking about it and we'd like to sell all of these to you. And after, reading more about your work on your website, we think that this is a nice way for these quilts to be used. So I was able to then connect with this family in person. They were downsizing someone into a care facility, and this beautiful collection of heritage quilts we got to chat about in person. This must be what Meagan feels like when you're getting things from people and learning the history of these items. I don't always get that connection. So with Barbara and Barbara's collection, some of these quilts have been made by her mother in the Maritimes. Some of them have Quilt Guild tags on them. The one with the Quilt Guild tag I saved for my couch. But otherwise, these pieces then went into coats. And as I sold them to people in my community, then I was able to share the story about Barbara and what these meant to her and her family. And so that's a really nice opportunity to be, kind of changing someone's attitude about repurposing things, understanding that, a lot of these textiles hold meaning and memory. People have been, connected to these items in their families for a long time. And then to understand that they're, are just going out into the world, but now they get to go out and live, a whole second life and just build more memories. And hopefully I'm making pieces that then will stay in other people's lives and families. Who knows, right? So I have the Barbara quilt that's left on my couch, and then maybe one more that is from that big batch that will get made into something. But that was a really memorable moment for me.
That's so lovely because it's not only is the textile getting repurposed and, hopefully those quilts wouldn't have ended up in the landfill, but just in terms of the stories being carried on as well, whether those were made by this woman herself or people she knew in her quilt guild or whatever, it just makes the finished product so valuable. And I'm assuming that the people buying those products would value that as well, and the story and the heritage that goes along with it. That's so cool.
Mm-hmm.
Meagan or Brynn, did you have stories about cool connections with customers and your products?
Yeah, that's so special to hear, Emily. I just want to say, that's just so heartwarming.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Brynn.
I am so lucky to have a lot of people reach out to me afterwards and be like, this is my experience with my sweater, and kind of one that is top of mind because it happened the most recently. Back in 2022, I was living with one of my friends. We were pretty new roommates, had only been living together for a few months and kind of met as roommates, moved in, met, and then became friends as we lived together. And I was posting sweaters online and she followed me and she showed up to one of my markets with cash to buy a very specific sweater that had a lighthouse placemat on it. And it was gray, and then it had these really cool light denim sleeves that kind of looked like clouds. And she bought it, she brought the right amount of cash, and I was like, girl, I'll just give this to, and she's like, nope, I'm paying for this. I literally went to the bank to take out cash for you, for this, to support you and your business, and I want this sweater. And that was that was Christmas 2022. Probably a week ago, I wake up to a text message saying, Brynn, I'm still getting compliments on my sweater every single time I go out. And that is just so heartwarming for me. And I've had numerous occasions where I sell to friends or sell to people who are in my proximity or like who I see once in a while, or like at the open houses at my studio that we used to have would have repeat people coming through all the time, and if they bought a sweater, they'll tell me a story. I had one guy tell me, I just made a shirt with like a cool patchwork design on front, and he was like, I can't go out with this shirt on without getting at least one compliment. And I had another guy tell me that he can't go out wearing his sweater because if he's like not feeling social or like is in a grumpy mood, because there's so much interaction that happens when people are wearing these clothes. And one of my other roommates, who I'm like really good friends with, he helped me with a market one time, and he was telling everybody about this one sweater that just was tan, and it had this really adorable vintage patch of just like teddy bears, just like a collage of like kind of vintage looking teddy bears. And every time he sees me, he's like, Brynn, I get so many compliments on this. I like literally can't go out, and there's no denim sleeves. It's just that teddy bear. And it's just like so heartwarming to hear, because it's just all of my designs and all stuff that's upcycled, and it's just getting all this attention. When people say they can't go out wearing that sweater if they're in a bad mood, like that's crazy to me.
I love that.
And it's so heartwarming, and it makes me so happy.
And that's so cool, Brynn, because I imagine, like, if you think about your source materials, so the sweatshirts and sweaters that you started with, that could have been like a sweatshirt hanging up in a thrift store with a stain on it, or maybe had a logo and a stain or something that's like not really seen as desirable, but you're turning it into something that has a history. It has your creativity expressed on it. It's a talking point for people when they go out wearing it. Like, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, there's lots of layers to it. It is wearable art, and it's they're all so excited to be like, my friend made this, blah blah blah, check her out. And I'm like it's just that's why I do this stuff.
That's amazing. Meagan, did you have any other stories you wanted to share about your products and people's reactions or connections to them?
Yeah, so essentially I've been lucky to have a lot of similar stories like that one I shared earlier, with doing very customized stuff with people's specific sales. But some of my favorite stories are from individuals who I wouldn't think would be the demographic for my product. So, I aimed the product at people who were like adventure gear and marine sailors, or just gravitate towards being on the water. But I like to ask people, how did you hear about us? And either if it's at a market with me talking to someone one-on-one, explaining even what upcycling is, and then just being absolutely mind blown, right? And then they connect just to the story itself. But my favorite part is then seeing people send photos of the bags they bought, traveling all over the world. And then I can also connect those photos to the person who donated the sale in the first place. So they're also seeing now, oh, this bag is traveling through Europe, right? So yeah, I love all of the custom and unique collaborations I do with local like-minded businesses and organizations, but it's also, to me, just so special to see someone light up at your business idea, and at first they would have maybe dismissed it and they think it's the coolest thing ever, and that's what kind of gives, I feel like, all of us the energy to keep going on, and then you get that spark a little bit back on hard, long market days and whatnot, right? So yeah, it's a little bit of both, even just the small moments, but seeing the bags, people send in photos to me so I can see now where they're ending up, is pretty cool.
I love this idea that you're taking sales that have already traveled potentially around the world, right? That has traveled oceans in their lives as sales, but then they're remade into something else and they're continuing to sail around the world. And it's just really amazing.
Oh, thanks.
So I'm curious, seeing as you guys are all really seasoned upcyclers, if somebody like, for example, myself, I'm mostly so with just like fabric that I get off the shelf, or I might get a piece of fabric in a swap, but I've never really, when I think about it, upcycled something before. I'm curious what advice you guys might have for someone who is really wanting to dive into upcycling but never has and maybe is a bit intimidated. Do you want to start, Emily?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I would say that even the term upcycling might then, create some expectations, and that might be a limit for people to, get started in repurposing. But just using anything that you already have in terms of fabric, searching your stash first. And I would say, that thrifting and finding material secondhand can be daunting, but turning to something like a fabric swap or finding material that has been created for the purpose that you would intend it. So if you're looking to sew a garment and you haven't sewn garments before at all, I would, seek garment appropriate fabric before you're going to start making something out of a curtain. But like choosing appropriate fabric for the project. And that is a skill that does come with experience. So maybe my advice for an upcycler would be to like give yourself grace and know that it won't be perfect at first, just like sewing even with new fabric won't be perfect at first. But having the courage to try and to start with anything. That's kind of how I stumbled into it, and having the courage to just make some mistakes. And by buying cheap fabric, then there's more license to make mistakes. So.
Good point. Good point. But it sounds like for you, in terms of advice, taking a little bit of the risk away. If you want to make a bag, start with something a bit more conventional in terms of some, I don't know, donated canvas, maybe some upholstery or something like that. Like stick to a similar type of fabric that would normally be used for the bag, as opposed to like starting with unusual fabrics that aren't always seen in that final product, right?
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
Brynn, do you have any tips for new upcyclers, repurposers?
Heck yeah, I do. I agree with Emily, is like, use what you already have. Literally, do not buy anything to start. Look around your house, ask your parents, ask your grandparents, ask your friends. Don't buy anything. Just start with the most low stakes, basic stuff. Bed sheets, tablecloths, stuff that's gonna go in the garbage anyways. Like, start there and play. I always, when I was teaching sewing classes, I would tell them, like, you need to practice before you even make anything first. And we would just like whether you're on a machine or by hand, just play first with no intention of even making a project. Just learn how to sew straight lines. Just learn how to sew different kinds of seams. Learn how to finish seams. Learn how to blank, like as samples before you even start doing whatever you're doing. Then your projects will turn into something you're proud of instead of learning on your project. I had another point, and it was very important.
So can I ask you a question in terms of playing? Maybe it'll come back to you.
Yeah.
So playing, maybe taking two different fabrics and like sewing one onto the other and see what that looks like and what it feels like and how to handle it and things like that too before you actually get to your good project.
Yeah, exactly. And just playing around and seeing what happens. Remembered my point is take apart things. Find a pair of jeans that are broken or whatever and rip them all apart. See how many seams are in there. See how many folds or like extra stuff, zippers, rivets, pockets, whatever. Take that apart. See how it's made. And then you'll be able to kind of like figure out when you're making new things, like or dresses or literally anything that you have that you don't want anymore. Just rip it apart. Seam rippers are fun. I have learned so much about garment construction by deconstruction and garments or whatever the heck else you're making. And then you have all this fabric to play with.
Such a brilliant idea.
Yeah. That's my biggest thing is just like take things apart, play, and don't buy anything.
That's really good advice. So it's really affordable and low risk, right?
Low risk is like my biggest thing. Also, I have 2 sewing rules. One of them, never sew when you're grumpy. Never sew when you're hungry.
Excellent advice.
They kind of go hand in hand, because I don't know about you, but I get really grumpy when I'm hungry. So, But nothing is good is going to come of it. If you're getting frustrated, put it to the side, come back later. If you're hungry, go get a little snack.
Yeah, that sounds good. Meagan, I know that you're doing really cool, very specific type of upcycling, but do you have other advice for new upcyclers / repurposers? Things that you might have learned in your process that you want to share?
Yeah, I think what really added value to myself personally was just going out and trying to meet people in this world of upcycling and sewing, and just getting out there and trying to learn as much as you can. And things like even just attending local events, local markets, chatting to the artists themselves, like how did they get into it? What did they learn? I think is a really huge value, just getting out and learning from others. If this is a path you want to go down, like you don't have to do it completely alone and guess your whole way through it. Like be curious and just ask people how they got to where they are, and most of the time they're more than happy to give you free advice, because we all have made trial and errors and whatnot, and there's lots of resources out there, especially even if you're going down the line to start a business. A few of us on here, we have no experience with business, and joining incubators. There's resources out there that can give you this information, and a lot of it is free. So just get out there and ask, network, and learn as much as you can from others who are willing to teach you, I think is what really was super valuable for me personally.
Great. That's some good advice. Hopefully this episode today is going to be, just that, sharing some information from some experienced upcyclers that might inspire some new folks to take it up as a fun sewing hobby. So I think that's a great place to end. Thank you, you guys. Thank you, Brynn, Emily, and Meagan today for your time and for sharing your many years combined experience and with everybody today. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Kat. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you. That was so fun.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this episode and are left feeling inspired. For more info about the podcast, including show notes for this and every episode, head to checkyourthread.com. I'd love to hear from you, so if you have any comments, questions, or ideas for future episodes, please get in touch by emailing zoe@checkyourthread.com or find me on Instagram @checkyourthread. Massive thanks to Patrick Potter for production support, to Sylvia Seller for the awesome logo design, and to Simon at Palm Skin Productions for the music. This ad-free podcast would not be possible without listener support, so if you feel you are able, please consider signing up to the Check Your Thread Patreon. For the equivalent of buying me a coffee each month, you'll be making it possible to continue producing regular episodes. Links can be found in the show notes and on the website checkyourthread.com. I hope you'll listen again next week. Until then, take care. Bye!